Missionaries crashed a barbecue party and won't let the girl alone, so she filed a restraining order. They ended up being deported.
I'm still
Well,
ready.
honey, let me tell you about the whole mess that went down with that poor girl next door. Rebecca Martinez, her
I'm
name
still
was.
heavily.
Sweet Thing worked as a nurse over at St. Mary's. I've been living on this street for 37 years, mind you, so I've seen my fair share of drama, but nothing, and I mean nothing, like what happened to that poor child. See, Rebecca moved in about 3 years ago, right after her divorce. Nice little two-bedroom ranch with the blue shutters, you know the one. At first, she kept to herself mostly, which I respected. Lord knows after my Harold passed, I needed my space too. But I could tell she was one of those Mormon girls, you get a sense for these things after a while. The way she dressed, all modest-like, never a tank top or shorts above the knee even in the dead of summer. Plus, I'd see those young men in white shirts coming around every few months, and she'd always let them in, all polite and whatnot. But things started changing maybe 2 years back. I notice because, well, I notice everything comes with the territory when you've got nothing but time and a good view of the street from my kitchen window. First thing I saw was her ditching those long sleeves. Started wearing regular clothes like the rest of us. Good for her, I thought. Then came the coffee maker on her counter. I could see it plain as day when she had her kitchen curtains open. Now, I know most folks wouldn't think twice about a coffee maker, but for a Mormon girl, that's like seeing a nun with a beer koozie. The real kicker was when she stopped wearing those undergarments. Don't ask me how I know, let's just say laundry day tells a lot of stories, and my second floor laundry room overlooks half the backyards on this street. No more of those long white undershirts hanging on the line. Just regular unmentionables like the rest of us wear. I was actually proud of her, if I'm being honest. Takes guts to break away from all that. My own mother was Catholic, and even though I went Methodist after marrying Harold, I know how hard it is when your whole family's got their nose in your spiritual business. But then came the missionaries. Lord have mercy, did they come. And come. And come some more. It started in April. I remember because my azaleas were just starting to bloom, and I was out deadheading the spent flowers when I heard the commotion. Two young boys in those crisp white shirts and ties, looking like they'd stepped out of a Sunday school poster. One was tall and gangly, all ears and elbows. Couldn't have been more than 19. The other was shorter, stockier, with this unsettling smile that reminded me of a used car salesman. Now, here's where it gets interesting. They had someone with them, a local boy looked familiar. Took me a minute, but then I realized it was one of the Hendricks kids from over on Oak Street. Kevin, I think his name was. Barely old enough to drive, standing there like he was some kind of chaperone. Rebecca answered the door in her scrubs. She'd just gotten off shift. Poor thing looked dead on her feet. Hair in a messy bun, face flushed from a long day of dealing with sick folks. She was polite enough, but I could tell she wasn't having it. Kept the screen door closed, spoke for maybe 2 minutes, then shut the door. The boys left, but not before I saw that Kevin kid smirking like he'd just pulled off some kind of prank. They came back the next week, and the week after that. Always with a different local kid in tow, sometimes Kevin, sometimes his older brother, once even his sister. All of them Mormons from that big ward over on the other side of town. I started keeping track in my little notebook, you know, the one where I write down when the garbage truck comes and who's got packages sitting out too long. Every Thursday, like clockwork. Rebecca would answer, tell them she wasn't interested, and they'd leave. But they always came back. By June, I could tell it was wearing on her. She'd gotten into the habit of checking her Ring doorbell before answering, and more than once I saw her just ignore the door entirely when those white shirts showed up. Smart girl. But then came the barbecue. Oh honey, what a disaster that turned out to be. It was a gorgeous Saturday in late June. Rebecca had finally gotten a weekend off, first one in months, from what I could tell, and decided to throw a little party for her coworkers. Nothing fancy, just burgers and beers in the backyard. She'd even cleaned that old grill of hers, which was saying something because that thing was rustier than my late husband's pickup truck. I was in my garden, pretending to weed, but really just keeping an eye on things because, well, someone has to. The party was going nicely, maybe 8 or 10 people, all in their 30s and 40s, the kind of hospital crowd you'd expect.
Oh,
Loud music, lots of laughing, the smell of charcoal and meat drifting over the fence. Made me nostalgic for the days when Harold
no.
and I used to entertain.
I
That's when I saw them coming up the street. Those two missionaries, with Kevin Hendricks trailing behind like a lost puppy. But instead of going to the front door like usual, they walked right around to the back gate like they owned the place. Now, I've seen some bold moves in my day, but this took the cake. They just waltzed into that girl's backyard, right into her private party, and started mingling like they'd been invited. The tall one, I later learned his name was Elder Peterson, made a beeline for a group by the grill. The shorter one, Elder Martinez, started chatting up some poor woman by the drinks table. I dropped my weeding tool and rushed upstairs to get a better view from my bedroom window. This was going to be good. Rebecca was at the grill, flipping burgers, completely oblivious to what was happening behind her. But I could see her guests getting uncomfortable. One man, a black fellow in a polo shirt, looked confused as hell as Elder Peterson started talking to him about something with great enthusiasm. A woman in a sundress was trying to back away from Elder Martinez, who was apparently explaining something very important while gesturing wildly. That's when Rebecca turned around. Oh, the look on that poor child's face. Pure shock, followed by the kind of anger that makes smart people do stupid things. She dropped her spatula right there on the ground and stormed over like a woman possessed. I couldn't hear exactly what she said from my window, but I didn't need to. Her body language said it all. Pointing toward the gate, hands on her hips, face red as a beet. The guests all stopped talking, drinks halfway to their mouths, watching this drama unfold like it was dinner theater. Elder Peterson tried to play innocent. I could see him holding up his hands, that fake smile plastered on his face. Kevin Hendricks, the little weasel, actually had the nerve to laugh. But Rebecca wasn't having any of it. She pointed at the gate again, more forcefully this time, and said something that made Kevin's face fall. Then she turned to her guests. I saw her apologizing, gesturing helplessly. The poor thing looked mortified. The missionaries and Kevin finally left, but the damage was done. The party limped along for another hour or so, but you could tell the mood was ruined. People started making excuses and leaving earlier than they probably would have otherwise. By 7 o'clock, Rebecca was cleaning up alone, and I swear I saw her crying over by the garbage can. That night, I saw the police car pull up. The next week brought something new, what they called heart attacking. Sounds sweet, doesn't it? It's not. I first noticed it on a Tuesday evening. I was watching my stories when I heard this rustling outside. Looked out my front window and saw some teenage girl I didn't recognize taping something to Rebecca's door. Paper hearts, dozens of them, all different colors, with what looked like Bible verses written in that bubbly teenage girl handwriting. The girl finished up and hurried away in a little white Honda with Utah plates. I made note of the license number, just in case. Rebecca found them when she got home from her night shift the next morning. Stood there on her porch in her scrubs, looking at all those hearts like they were diseased. She tore them down one by one and stuffed them in her garbage can, but I could tell it shook her up. It happened 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. Different kids each time, but always the same Utah plates on their cars. Always hearts, always Bible verses, always when Rebecca wasn't home. I started writing down the times and license numbers in my notebook. Someone needed to keep track. Then came the social media business. Now, I'm not one for Facebook usually, too much drama and not enough substance, but my daughter convinced me to get an account to see pictures of the grandkids. And wouldn't you know it, that's how I found out about the campaign against poor Rebecca. One of the Hendricks family had posted something about a wayward sister needing prayers. Didn't name names, but the comments made it clear who they were talking about. So sad to see someone choose darkness over light. We need to surround her with love and bring her back to the fold. Praying for Sister Martinez to find her way back to Jesus. Made my blood boil, if I'm being honest. Whatever Rebecca's choices were, they were hers to make. But these people were treating her like some kind of public project. The worst part was seeing the likes and shares.
He's here.
Her own family members, aunts, cousins, people who'd known her since she was in diapers, joining in on this public shaming. Her mother actually shared one of the posts with a crying emoji and a comment about praying for prodigal children. I may not be the most religious woman, but I know gossip when I see it, and I know bullying when I see it. This was both. The breaking point came in July. I was watering my petunias when I saw the police car pull up again. This time, there were two officers, and they had someone in the back seat. Took me a minute to realize it was one of those missionaries, the tall one, Elder Peterson. Rebecca was on her porch, still in her bathrobe and slippers, talking to the officers. She looked shaken up, kept gesturing toward her Ring doorbell. After about 10 minutes, they took the young man away, and Rebecca went back inside. Later that day, I saw her checking every window, every door, like she was securing a fortress. Got herself a baseball bat from somewhere and left it by the front door. Poor thing was scared in her own home. The phone calls started that night. I know because my bedroom window was open and hers was too, and sound carries on these summer evenings. I couldn't make out words, but I could hear her voice getting more and more upset with each call. I didn't want this to happen, she kept saying. I just wanted to be left alone. By the time the sun came up, she'd unplugged her landline and turned off her cell phone. But they found other ways to reach her. Her parents showed up 3 days later. I knew they were her parents because they looked like older versions of Rebecca. Same dark hair, same build, same stubborn set to their job. But where Rebecca's face was open and kind, theirs were closed off, hard as granite. They didn't knock politely or ring the doorbell. They pounded on that door like they were trying to break it down. I could hear them shouting from inside my kitchen. Rebecca, open this door right now. You've gone too far this time, Mija. How could you do this to that poor boy? Rebecca never let them in. She talked to them through the door, her voice muffled but clearly upset. This went on for nearly an hour before they finally gave up and left. But not before her father kicked over her potted plants on the porch. I thought that was the end of it. How wrong I was. The vandalism started small. Eggs, mostly, thrown at her house in the middle of the night. I caught some of it on my own security camera, kids in hoodies, moving fast, always different ones. Then it escalated to rocks. Small ones at first, then bigger ones that actually broke her kitchen window. Rebecca patched up the window herself with plywood and duct tape. Never called a repairman, never asked for help. Just fixed it and went on with her life like nothing had happened. But I could see the toll it was taking. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She started parking her car in the garage instead of the driveway, and she installed motion sensor lights all around her house. The woman was living in fear. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in August. I know because Rebecca asked me to be a character witness. Apparently, my security footage was going to be important evidence. I was happy to help, though I dreaded having to testify in court. But the Monday night before the hearing, something happened that changed everything. I was up late reading one of those romance novels I pretend not to enjoy when I heard voices outside. Loud, angry voices coming from Rebecca's yard. I looked out my window and saw two figures by her front door. One was definitely that bishop fellow I'd seen around the neighborhood, the one who looked like Rebecca's uncle. The other was harder to make out in the dark. I grabbed my binoculars, don't judge me, every neighborhood watch needs proper equipment, and saw it was one of the missionaries. The shorter one, Elder Martinez. They were talking to Rebecca through her Ring doorbell, and she was clearly telling them to leave. But they didn't leave. They stood there arguing with her through that camera for nearly 20 minutes. I could hear her voice getting more and more frantic, and I could see the bishop getting more and more aggressive, leaning into the camera, pointing his finger like he was scolding a child. That's when I called the police myself. The officers arrived within minutes. I developed a good relationship with the local precinct after calling in suspicious activity so many times. They found the bishop and the missionary still on Rebecca's porch, still refusing to leave even after she'd told them multiple times to go away. What happened next, I'll never forget as long as I live. The bishop, when he saw the police car, actually tried to run. This 60-year-old man in a suit and tie, running across Rebecca's front yard like he was fleeing a crime scene. The officers caught him before he made it to the street, and the sight of this supposedly holy man being handcuffed on the sidewalk was something else. But the missionary, that poor stupid boy, he just stood there. When the officers told him to leave, He looked confused, like he couldn't understand why he was in trouble. When they told him again, more firmly this time, he started crying. Actually crying, like a child. I was just trying to help her, he kept saying as they put him in the back of the patrol car. I was just trying to save her soul. The bishop got a trespassing warning. The missionary got arrested for refusing to comply with a police order. And Rebecca, poor Rebecca, watched it all from behind her front door, talking to the officers through her Ring camera because she was too scared to come outside. The hearing the next day was a formality after that. The judge took one look at all the evidence: my security footage, Rebecca's Ring recordings, the police reports, and granted the restraining order without hesitation. But that's when things got really ugly. The first sign was the phone calls. Not to Rebecca this time, but to me. Angry voices demanding to know why I'd interfered in church business. How they got my number, I'll never know, but they had it. Calls at all hours, from numbers I didn't recognize, people telling me I was going to hell for helping Rebecca persecute innocent missionaries. I changed my number and got an unlisted line. But they found other ways to harass me too. Dead flowers left on my porch. My garbage cans knocked over every trash day. Someone even let the air out of my tires twice. If they were willing to go after an old woman who'd just been a witness, I couldn't imagine what they were doing to Rebecca. I found out soon enough. The vandalism escalated. Not just eggs and rocks anymore, but broken bottles in her driveway, paint thrown at her house, even a bag of dog excrement left on her porch. Every morning brought some new violation, some new way to remind her that she wasn't welcome in her own neighborhood. The worst part was the night sounds. Rebecca told me later that they'd started driving by her house at all hours, honking their horns, shouting obscenities, playing loud music. She couldn't sleep, couldn't rest, couldn't have a moment's peace in what should have been her sanctuary. She installed a security system that would make Fort Knox jealous. Cameras everywhere, motion sensors, floodlights that could illuminate half the block. Her house started looking like a prison, which I suppose it was. Then came the news about the missionary. It was a Thursday morning in late August when Rebecca called me, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "Mrs. Patterson," she managed between gasps, "something terrible has happened." The missionary, Elder Martinez, had been deported back to Mexico after his arrest. His student visa had been revoked, his mission terminated, his dreams of getting an American education destroyed. He'd been staying in a hotel in Mexico City, waiting for his family to come get him, when he'd taken his own life. Sleeping pills, from what Rebecca had been told. A whole bottle of them, washed down with tequila. He'd left a note blaming her for ruining his life, for destroying his chance at salvation, for turning his family against him. The church called it a medical emergency in their official statement. But word got out anyway. Word always gets out. Rebecca was devastated. This young man, barely 20 years old, was dead. And while she hadn't pulled the trigger or handed him the pills, she'd been part of the chain of events that led to his destruction. "I never wanted this," she kept saying. "I just wanted them to leave me alone." But the church members didn't see it that way. To them, she was a murderer, a destroyer of faith, an agent of Satan who'd corrupted and killed an innocent servant of God. The harassment became vicious. They started leaving dead animals on her porch. Roadkill mostly, but sometimes pets that had been killed specifically for the purpose. The smell was horrific, and the message was clear. Her car was vandalized almost nightly. Keyed, tires slashed, windows broken. She had to start taking Uber to work because her insurance company dropped her after the 5th claim. Someone broke into her backyard and destroyed her garden. Not just trampled it, but poisoned it. Every plant, every flower, every vegetable she'd been growing, dead and rotting in neat rows like a warning. The final straw came when they started targeting her at work. Rebecca had always been a dedicated nurse, well-liked by her colleagues and patients. But someone at the hospital started spreading rumors about her mental instability and her involvement in a young man's death. Patients started refusing her care. Colleagues started avoiding her. Her supervisor, a weak-willed man who avoided conflict at all costs, started scheduling her for the worst shifts and the most difficult patients. She took a leave of absence that turned into a resignation. After 12 years of nursing, she was unemployed and effectively unemployable in her field. That's when she decided to leave. Not just the neighborhood, not just the city, but the entire state. She'd had enough. More than enough. I helped her pack. It broke my heart to see her go, but I understood. She'd been through hell, and there was no sign it was going to end anytime soon. We loaded her car in the dark, like fugitives fleeing a crime scene. Most of her belongings went to charity. She couldn't take much where she was going. Just clothes, a few personal items, and her nursing credentials in case she could find work somewhere else under a different name. She was going to Oregon, she told me. Her aunt had a cabin in the woods where she could stay while she figured out her next move. Somewhere far from Mormon missionaries and church bishops and nosy relatives who thought harassment was a form of love. The morning she left, I stood on my porch and watched her drive away. She looked so small behind the wheel of that little Honda, like a child running away from home. I cried as she disappeared around the corner, and I wasn't ashamed of it. But the story didn't end there. Oh no, honey. It was just getting started. 2 weeks after Rebecca left, I got a call from a reporter. Someone had leaked the story to the local news, and they wanted to interview me about the religious persecution case that had driven a young woman from her home. I told them everything. Every detail I've just told you, plus some I haven't. The full truth about how a group of people who claimed to follow Jesus had systematically destroyed an innocent woman's life in the name of salvation. The story ran on the evening news and was picked up by the national networks within hours. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they all wanted a piece of it. The Mormon Church found itself in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons, and the local ward that had orchestrated the harassment was disbanded pending investigation. Bishop Hendricks, who'd led the campaign against Rebecca, was excommunicated from the church, not for the harassment, mind you, but for bringing negative publicity to the organization. Kevin Hendricks, the boy who'd started it all by serving as a chaperone for the Missionaries, was expelled from BYU and lost his scholarship. The family that had owned the house Rebecca fled from, they couldn't sell it. Word had gotten out about what happened there, and nobody wanted to buy a house with that kind of history. They ended up losing it to foreclosure. But the real karma came later. Remember Elder Peterson, the tall missionary who'd started this whole mess? He completed his mission and went home to Utah, where he was hailed as a martyr who'd suffered for his faith. He married his high school sweetheart in a temple ceremony, had 3 kids, and became a successful insurance salesman. Until the day he got behind the wheel drunk and plowed into a school bus. 23 children were injured. 2 died at the scene. Elder Peterson, who'd spent 2 years preaching about righteousness and salvation, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the story. And Rebecca? Last I heard, she was doing well in Oregon. Working as a nurse practitioner at a small clinic, married to a kind man who didn't care about her past, living a quiet life surrounded by trees and mountains and people who respected boundaries. She sends me Christmas cards every year. Never signs her real name, just your friend from Maple Grove, but I know it's her. The handwriting gives her away. I keep those cards in a special box on my mantle, right next to the photos of my grandchildren. Because sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. The house next door is still empty. Has been for 3 years now. The bank tried to rent it out, but word got around. Nobody wants to live in a place with that kind of energy, that kind of history. Sometimes I sit on my porch in the evenings and look at those dark windows, and I think about what happened there. How a young woman's simple desire to be left alone turned into a nightmare that destroyed multiple lives and exposed the ugly underbelly of religious zealotry. I think about Elder Martinez, that poor stupid boy who died alone in a hotel room because he couldn't handle the weight of his failures. I think about his parents, who probably still don't know the whole truth about why their son took his own life. I think about the children who were hurt because a drunk driver couldn't live with his own guilt and shame. And I think about Rebecca, who survived it all and built a new life from the ashes of the old one. There's no moral to this story, no neat ending that ties everything together with a bow. It's just life, Messy, tragic, unfair, and occasionally beautiful despite everything. But if there's one thing I learned from watching it all unfold, it's this. When someone says no, they mean no. When someone asks to be left alone, leave them alone. And when someone draws a boundary, respect it. Because persistence isn't love. Harassment isn't ministry. And sometimes the people who claim to be saving souls are the ones destroying them. I still live on Maple Grove Drive, in the same house I've called home for nearly 4 decades. I still keep my notebook, still watch the street, still notice everything that happens in my little corner of the world. But these days, when I see those young men in white shirts walking up and down the sidewalk, I don't just watch. I keep my phone handy, ready to call the police if needed. Because every neighborhood needs someone looking out for the underdog. Every community needs someone willing to stand up to bullies, even when those bullies wear name tags and carry Bibles. And every story like Rebecca's needs someone to tell it, to make sure the truth doesn't get buried under layers of righteous justification and religious spin. That someone is me. Mrs. Mel Patterson, neighborhood busybody, retired school secretary, and proud defender of people's right to be left the hell alone. And I'm not going anywhere.